Cui, having told the Z-Fighters all he can and receiving orders to return to HQ, decides to leave the area, telling the others that he'll see them whenever Cell shows up. He starts flying off, only for Vegeta to speak up.
We haven't seen you in nearly a year, and you've somehow gotten this powerful. I won't let you go that easy, not without answering some questions.
Vegeta charges up a small ki blast in his hands, preparing to launch it at the catfish.
I've already told you, Vegeta, this is far bigger than our pride now. That creature has to be stopped at all costs. Whenever we defeat him, though, I promise to come back and kick your smug ass.
Cui smirked before blasting off. Vegeta scoffs and powers his ki blast down, admitting that he shouldn't waste the little energy he has left. Nappa, still a giant monkey, grabs the fake moon and crushes it, returning the ki used back to the prince. Raditz and Piccolo had been speaking about Cui, and the Namekian had some ideas about him. Hearing the very robotic and logical orders given by what sounded like an old man gave Piccolo some hints, along with the ki draining spheres and enhanced scouter. It all pointed towards the person Cell had once talked about. The Namekian has no allies in this timeline, at least none alive other than Gohan. However, Raditz had grown closer to Big Green in their year of training, with the two thinking and fighting quite similarly, if only for different reasons. The Saiyan was cautious, but only to save his own skin, though when push came to shove, he was a brutal combatant. Without wanting to put Gohan in danger and the humans still wary of his existence, Piccolo decides to confide in Raditz, telling him about Gero and Cell's plans to become perfect.
What? So you're saying this Gero is still...
Raditz found his mouth covered by a giant green hand, one which he nearly bit.
Shut your mouth. We can't let the others know. Not until I can trust them. 1, cover my mouth again and I'll vaporize you. And 2, that's a good idea. The prince is a schemer like his old man, and Nappa is as dumb as a bag of bricks. He'll probably help out Cell just to test his strength against that perfect form thing, or something stupid like that.
Raditz laughs at the idea, though Piccolo's expression remains deadpan.
Well, if he is alive, we'll need to get in contact somehow. Aside from that, I think our objective is clear. Get stronger and defeat Cell. Ha! That's the spirit, Namekian.
Raditz smacks his rival on the back, the two walking over to rejoin their group. Cui finds himself flying into a large meadow, filled with beautiful flowers and waist-high grass that flows like water in the wind. He lands and walks over to a clearing near the forest. From above, it looks as if grass hadn't grown here due to the nearby trees, but when Cui reaches in, his hand disappearing into the ground, their cloaking device becomes apparent. Anyone could stumble upon this, even Cell, but that's a chance they have to take. The catfish disappears underground and into a large cylindrical room, its only feature being the bulkhead that leads into the base proper, and a hulking man with green armor and red hair.
You spoke to them. The doctor is displeased.
The man uncrossed his arms and stood up straight, preparing to scan the catfish.
Oh please, I'm a living being, not the robot he wants. He should calculate for that if he's such a genius.
Cui puts his arms and legs out, allowing for the pat down.
Calculating for such things is difficult, unlike following parameters.
The robot gave a side eye, one which was oddly human.
Was that some attitude I heard? It seems all those bird videos you watch have taught you a little about life, hasn't it?
The android goes silent before telling Cui he was free to enter. He does so and heads directly to the central lab, where Gero and Whilow's android bodies are working on another project. The former Red Ribbon Doctor snarls as he mentions the mission parameters being broken, though Whilow tells Cui it wasn't something they weren't prepared for. Thankfully, it seemed that only 2 of the Z-Fighters had deduced their existence. However, Cell could as well now. This meant their time to complete Android 28 was cut in half, so they'd no longer be able to monitor the situation above ground. That duty would fall to Mark II. The android from earlier, Android 16 Mark II, walks in. He thanks the two for trusting him with such an important task before telling Cui that they'll need to assemble the Rangers to train. Oh no, not the Rangers. Those guys were so lame, far more so than the Ginyu Force. Are you disobeying an order from your captain, 23? Mark II eyed the catfish.
No, of course I wouldn't. Just make sure those four can keep up. I'll see you in the training center.
Cui then exited the room. If it wasn't one tyrant, it was another, I guess. Another year goes by, with everyone training their hardest to surpass Cell. Speaking of the bio-android, he was getting a little frustrated. Goku should have been revived already. What was taking him so long? Sure, things had changed from how they originally went, but Cell was positive the Saiyan would have come back by now. Perhaps he stayed since there weren't any threats to the Earth? But surely he'd want to see his son and keep him from being influenced by the prince. Hima noticed his increased agitation and attempted to ask what was wrong. When Cell answered that it was nothing and the girl pressed the issue, she soon found a ki blast blowing a hole straight through her chest. This horrified 21, the pain unbearable, sending her crashing to the ground. The wound healed without issue, but that didn't make the girl any less disturbed. The two had trained before, having intense fighting matches, but never had Cell attacked her like this. She hated him with all her heart, but some part of her still wanted to be with him, to not give up on the only person who ever accepted her, including her unstable side. However, this attack, did he really love her like he claimed? Of course he did. She just pushed too hard. She bothered him when she knew he was feeling stressed. Next time she'll be silent and won't get in the way. This was her fault. It had to be. The alternative was a fate that Hima did not want to face. Speaking of fates people hated facing, Frieza and his father were floating deep within space, both bruised and scratched up, the remains of a shattered planet circling the two. They had obviously been training hard, though Frieza only recently recovered enough to move around and fight. He sustained massive amounts of damage from his fight with Cell, and was now forced to don cybernetic limbs, which made him look rather grotesque in Cold's opinion. Nevertheless, this was his boy, and he'd do anything to help overcome this gruesome creature named Cell, even if it meant having to train. Ugh, just the thought of continuing this barbaric act made Cold want to just give up and create another son, but Barry Blue encouraged the king to try this out. After all, a strong tyrant would create a strong empire. Cold had to convince himself that this was all in service of his kingdom, his bloodline, his clan. This was all for him. Another year of training passes, with Piccolo, Raditz, and Gohan all forming a pretty tight clique. Vegeta had allowed the boy to rejoin his uncle since he had to heal for about a month before returning to train. In the meantime, Big Green gave Gohan a haircut, something Raditz found appalling but allowed when Chi-Chi was brought up. Speaking of the woman, Gohan actually got to visit her, on the orders of his uncle Piccolo, since the Namekian knew how important parents were. Raditz too found this important, though never overtly said so. The two took pride in watching Gohan grow up, now being 6 years old, nearly 3 years since his father passed. That was something that always bothered Big Green. Just how could Goku stay away for so long? True, Vegeta and Nappa had calmed down, and Cui and Raditz had apparently adjusted to Earth well enough, but still, didn't he miss his family? His rival? Piccolo was beginning to wonder if Goku would ever come back, especially since he remembered the Dragon Balls only had a 1-year time limit. Just what was that guy planning? Gohan too had been thinking about this, but he tried to stay brave for his mother and the Saiyans. His adoptive uncle was the only person he ever really felt comfortable confiding in, even if the Namekian had difficulty consoling him. Well, while the boy missed his father, he did still have Chi-Chi, Piccolo, the Ox King, and even Raditz, who also had difficulty showing emotions other than anger. Despite his rather unique situation, Gohan counted his lucky stars, reminding himself that his daddy was the most powerful man he knew, and that he'd be back someday. He just knew it. For now, though, he'd have to become strong, just like his father. Every one of the Z Fighters got some serious gains, including Vegeta, who by this time had met Bulma, and I think he'd ask about a gravity chamber. Sure, Goku has always been more unorthodox compared to the Prince, but their brains have always been on the same wavelength, so he'd think of it eventually. And he had 3 years, so just give me this. Raditz, Nappa, and Vegeta all try to become the legendary Super Saiyan, though only the Prince is serious about it. Nappa thinks it's just a legend, while Raditz doesn't believe he's worthy or special enough to achieve such a power. Oh, but Vegeta, not only does he think the legend is real, but that he, the Prince of all 5 remaining Saiyans, is special. His powerful bloodline will allow him to become the Super Saiyan of legend. Well, at the end of their 3 years on Earth, the Saiyans have vastly improved, especially Vegeta and Gohan. The Prince believes they could easily destroy Frieza's first form by now. Heck, even if he had a power level of like 60 million, they'd still be able to beat him. Probably. Having much more time than originally, Bulma had constructed several large spaceships, all equipped with powerful engines and materials strong enough to survive orbit. She'd also gone through the trouble of engineering better Saiyan armor for the group, though she'd only presented them to Vegeta and Gohan. The vegetable crew are all stoked to travel back into space, to take the fight to that old space lizard. All except Gohan, who, for the first time in a long while, feels trepidation. Chi-Chi begs for him to stay on Earth, while Piccolo encourages him to explore and see space. Krillin, the only human willing to leave Earth, saw both sides of this argument. He understood the fear this child felt, as it was even enough to scare him, and he was a grown man. On the other hand, this was a once-in-a-lifetime deal. Getting to see space was something only a handful of humans ever got to do, and here they were just being handed it on a silver platter. This helps Gohan feel a little more comfortable, and so chooses to join the crew and fly off to Frieza Planet 1. On the other side of the galaxy, Frieza was being outfitted with another set of mechanical limbs. The scientist had managed to further polish the original design, allowing the Emperor to look far closer to his base form, though Cold still had that look of disgust. This only made Frieza angrier, blaming Cell for ruining his image. No, his entire life. The wish orbs on Namek had been destroyed along with it, and the ones on Earth were guarded by that damned monster. However, with these new prosthetics, that would all change. All Frieza needed was just one more week to train and get used to these new parts, and then he'd have his revenge. The Emperor cackled to himself, unable to hold in this jubilation at the scenarios running through his mind. Cell may have disfigured him and taken away the massive potential he once had, but this broken body was more than enough. For with it, he'd create a living hell for that damned bug. Frieza slammed his fist into the table, losing control and causing an earthquake that split the world in half. He would have thanked the mechanic for crafting such powerful prosthetics, but he didn't survive the shockwave. Oh well, he served his purpose. Now, it was back to training. Speaking of which, Cell was vigorously doing just that. The Bugman's paranoia had only grown with each month. Each day, Goku refused to return. This was not what he had planned, not how things were supposed to go. The Saiyan was supposed to come back to life, fight and train with Vegeta and Raditz, befriend them, and then go Super Saiyan when Frieza showed up to Earth. Instead, he stayed dead, and the Emperor still hasn't shown up. He did try to summon Shenron with Hima's help, but the dragon revealed Goku was somehow alive and refused to return to Earth? Who was Shenron? No, who was Goku to refuse him? Well, if Goku was training with someone special in the afterlife, then Cell would just have to train with someone special in the living world. He forced Hima to train day in and day out. The two had no breaks. Even when 21 went feral and tried running off to absorb living things, the android would simply be beaten into submission. Now, while 21 was a good training partner, Cell could tell she wasn't like him. She didn't push herself to become stronger, simply sparring to be with him, to please him. Such a sentiment disgusted Cell. He'd rather she just refuse him in that case. But still, he did need a powerful training partner, and one did come to mind. Way back when he assaulted Wilow's lab, he had recovered an egg, with a creature the two thought could possibly defeat him. If the egg did house such a creature, then it would undoubtedly be able to challenge Cell, and if it was so young, then he could brainwash it like 21. The Bugman made his way towards where he'd left the egg, picking it up and then suddenly throwing it down towards the earth. Unlike most eggs, this one didn't break open, or even crack. No matter, Cell would just have to try even harder. The Bugman teleported behind the egg, kicking it high into the air, where he then kicked it several times, ending the combo with an axe kick that sent it tumbling towards the ground. There, Cell stood, charging up a large Kamehameha, putting his all into it, before firing the wave just as the egg was only inches away. The full force of such an attack shook the earth, causing Kami, Tien, and Yamcha to wonder if the monster had finally lost its patience. Once things returned to normal, the android notices that the egg had, indeed, cracked open. Cell stared slack-jawed, as it was apparently empty. He began cursing and hitting the ground, unable to believe the doctors had somehow tricked him all this time, making him waste valuable moments trying to hatch this thing, instead of fighting 21.
Ooh, fighting? That sounds fun!
Cell and 21 look up to see a jolly, pink man standing there with the biggest smile imaginable. But that's where we'll be leaving things off for right now. If you enjoyed this part, then maybe you'll enjoy a series all about Cooler dealing with his own cybernetic issues. But even if you don't check that out, thank you for getting to this part of the video. Have a good day or night wherever you are. That's it for now. Bye-bye.